welcome everybody. Thank you for sticking with us during some technical challenges which we're still experiencing while we make this webinar accessible for our panel in particular, and obviously for everybody listening in. My name's Kate Headley. I'm one of the directors at the Clear Company. I'm really proud to chair this panel of, I have to say, friends, because I know all of the panel members really pretty well, and I know they've all got some great contributions to make. I also know they're all extraordinarily busy during the frenetic time which is COVID-19, so I want to thank them personally for giving us the time today. So basically, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to introduce the topic for discussion. So we're struggling to get Robin Christopherson online, so I'll come to Robin last. But if I can start then, first of all, with you, Nick, who, as the owner of the Goss consultancy and also as an accredited Clear Company partner, just a brief introduction from you would be great. Thank you.
Well, hello, it's very good to be here today. My name's Nick Goss, like Kate said, Goss Consultancy. We work across a whole wide range of sectors and with a whole wide range of clients. Very often with a Clear Company as well to help them become as accessible, diverse and inclusive in the way that they both employ people, but also how they devise policy and deliver services. So it's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. And Paul?
Hi, Kate. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you really well. Paul Deemer, Head of Diversity and Inclusion for NHS Employers.
Thank you, Kate. So Paul Deemer, hi everybody, my name's Paul Deemer. I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at NHS Employers. NHS Employers are a employers association, and we represent the 500 or so NHS organisations in England, and we help to support them in a range of human resources related issues, ranging from recruitment through to employment and terms and conditions of service, and also my particular area, which is advising around diversity and inclusion. It's good to be here, and look forward to talking to you.
Thanks, Paul. Maria?
Hello, it's Maria at HS2. I am the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Workforce Manager there. And my role is to help make sure that our workforce is included at all stages of the work life cycle, from recruitment to retention. And I am severely deaf myself. I normally lip read and use subtitles, so during this communication I will be relying on the captioning service that's being provided. Thank you, Kate, by the way.
You're very welcome, Maria, and thank you for joining us. And have we got Robin online yet? No?
Unfortunately not at the moment.
No problem. So I'll just do a brief introduction. Robin Christopherson is Head of Digital Inclusion at AbilityNet. He's a legend in his own lifetime. Robin is blind and is a global authority on inclusion through that digital perspective. And if you have tried working on a spreadsheet remotely with Robin, then you need to be pretty good at it, let me tell you, because I fell foul of that and failed miserably. Just a little bit about your chair. So I'm Kate Headley. I am significantly sight impaired. So if my head goes all over the place trying to keep up with people, then that's because I'm just trying to reach the point of vision. So what you will probably have picked up as an audience is that we have people from diverse environments. So we've got obviously Paul with the key workers in the NHS, and a number of others who are working within the service sector who have got people who are furloughed or remote working. We've also got a range of different impairments, conditions and disabilities, which people will share their personal story with you as we go through the webinar. So it's a truly authentic and I think quite personal insight into the impact of COVID-19, particularly for people with a disability. And the purpose of this webinar is to basically pump our panel for all we're worth to get as much information, guidance, advice, top tips, and I think real core insights that employers can then use, and individuals, if you're also listening, within the workplace as we start to think about what the return to whatever normal might be as we go forward over the next few months. So just to start us off then, I think everybody, it's fair to say, has felt the impact of this pandemic, and it crept up on us publicly really quickly, although there's obviously discussions around how fast that was. But how has it created both challenges and opportunities for employers who have got colleagues with disabilities that they want to support and engage with in the workplace? So, Paul, because you're the one that's got all those key workers in place, you've got a slightly different story from those of us who are working predominantly on that whole working from home. How has it had an impact for you, either creating an opportunity or a challenge, would you say, within the NHS?
Yeah, as you can imagine, Kate, it's been quite a torrid time within the NHS, actually. I don't think anybody was quite prepared. I mean, nobody was prepared for the pandemic, that's for sure. And I don't think anybody, if I'm honest, had thought about at the beginning quite what the impact was going to be on staff. And certainly, the figures and the data that we started to see very early on. So if you go back, I actually checked back on my records recently. It was actually on the 5th of April. I sent an email to my chief executive because there was a report on the news which was highlighting the potential disproportionate impact of the pandemic on Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff. So that was relatively early on. And as you know, from there, that whole issue really snowballed and turned into something, particularly worrying, which we had to address. The interesting thing was that whilst it started as an issue for Black, Asian, minority ethnic staff, we started to look at the wider issues, and obviously it was an issue for everybody, and there were implications for everybody. And we get now to the point where we are seriously now risk assessing every member of staff within NHS organisations, and that has included risk assessments not just in relation to ethnicity but also in relation to disability, taking into account factors around age and gender as well, and it just shows you the brevity now of the whole issue. And I think just more generally, it's highlighted for employers the importance of health and safety, I suppose, in its broadest sense, and the need to look after staff and their health and well-being.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's a good insight. We'll come back and talk about some more. That this focus on health and well-being is that's what I would call an opportunity. If we've got employers focusing on it, let's keep that focus there. Nick, be interested in your perspective in terms of both that opportunity and challenge that this situation we find ourselves in has presented for someone who has a disability and who employs people with a disability.
Thank you, Kate. I think obviously to reflect what Paul was saying about this has been a very torrid time for many people, and we don't want to deflect that way in any way whatsoever. But I think also it is a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity. Because
and I put him on as well. There we go.
Audio as well.
Audio.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, we're just getting Robin, I think now. Apologies, Nick.
Hi, Robin. No, like I said, I think it is really a once in a lifetime period of change for everybody.
Robin, could you possibly mute while Nick's talking?
Sorry, Robin. We've spent the last 15 minutes trying to hear you. Now we're asking you to mute yourself. Sorry about that. And so yeah, it's a lifetime period of change, in a lifetime of once in a lifetime period of adjustment, and in a way, once in a lifetime bit of opportunity in. I would say that, you know, what disabled people have been having to do for a long time when it comes to making adjustments, making change, problem solving, if you like. Quite frankly, we're all having to do it now, and to a big degree, we're all kind of in the same boat. So I think what I would say is that although it has been a lot of people in period of anxiety and period of concern, what it does provide us with, I think, is a real opportunity to, in a way, make adjustment a main list. Quite frankly, right now we're all having to make adjustments very quickly, very broadly, very professionally, very personally, and very effectively.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks. Maria, would you like to build on that in terms of, for you, would you say COVID presents opportunity or challenge or a combination for our disabled colleagues?
Well, I mean, obviously the impact has been very great, but we've been able to sort of capitalize on the lessons that have been learned when the lockdown was started. So, you know, our supply chain has been great in sort of initiating a rigorous process of health and safety so that they could really minimize the risk for our site workers, which is very important. And we've started very, very slowly trickling back into the offices as well. But again, this is really important because it really, we have to make sure that we incorporate all of the lessons that have been learned during the start of lockdown and really take things slowly, making sure that people feel safe and that we account for, you know, everybody's assessed needs and circumstances in the return to work. And one of the things that has been that actually people don't talk about very much is the fact that according to the latest ONS research, you know, while disabled people are only 1/5 of the population, 1/3 of all deaths have been disabled people. And we really must be mindful of this as we go back to work, because we need to make sure that people, the return to work is not just about entering the offices, but also that we consider how do people get to work, the commute, etc., and not just the work itself. That's really important. But it is equally, as well as a challenge, it is also an opportunity because obviously, you know, we've made leaps and bounds now in terms of understanding what it's like to, you know, what it could be like working from home, using accessible technology, with a bit of flexible time factored in so that we can attend to caring responsibilities and other personal issues. So I think the opportunity has definitely been there.
Brilliant, thanks, Maria. That's really insightful, and I do agree. We have got this opportunity, and that, you know, we've been forced almost overnight in many cases to go from working in an office to working remotely, and that does create in many ways an opportunity for flexibility and using technology more effectively, so that we feel more included. But equally, of course, it distances us from our colleagues, so that brings its challenges as well, which we can talk about a little bit more. But that's great, and as we start to move forward, I agree, let's not lose those lessons learned. Robin, welcome. Can we see and hear you?
Well, I don't know. Can you see me? Sorry.
We can see you. We can.
Okay.
Yes. Welcome.
And you can hear me. Oh, great. Yeah, I had to, in the end, switch to another computer, and on a Mac, it was okay. But yeah, there was some trauma for a while there. Apologies.
No worries at all. You're the consummate professional, so I'm sure it's fine. Where we are at,
I had my
Robin,
daughter earlier trying to find the unmute button. Well, so apologies.
I had a daughter helping me as well. We've all got our own technical support in place. Robin, the panel have just introduced themselves briefly in terms of who they are and why they wanted particularly to be part of this panel, and just talking about whether COVID presents opportunity or challenge through the lens of disability. So if you'd like to just contribute on that, we'll move on to just teasing up some of those themes that are coming through now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Robin Christopherson. I'm Head of Digital Inclusion at UK tech charity AbilityNet, and I'm also blind myself. This is a hugely important topic to cover, and it's probably quite a pivotal moment as well, because diversity is a hot topic. Let's try and make disability as vibrant an element of this kind of diversity festival that we're experiencing at the moment. And people like Caroline Casey with the Valuable 500 are doing brilliant work in making sure that disability isn't the forgotten element, the Cinderella of the diversity party that everyone's having. Because, Health and Safety Executive, the HSE, have done research that has shown the value of having disabled employees. We know that a diverse workforce is really, really important and makes better products and services. And in the area of disability, that's certainly the case as well. It'll make your products more inclusive. But not only that, disabled employees, the HSE has shown, given the right adjustments, and we could talk about reasonable adjustments, and I'm sure we will, in the context of transitioning to home and sort of gradually transitioning back into the workplace. But given the right adjustments, HSE have shown that disabled employees are as productive as their able-bodied counterparts. But more than that, they actually are more loyal. They stay longer in their jobs, and I can certainly, concur there. Just having a job is absolutely brilliant. The stats are against people with disabilities, unfortunately, still today, 20 odd years after the legislation came into effect. But they actually take less sickness as well, sick leave, than their able-bodied counterparts. So we're kind of healthier. I don't know, potentially less prone to pulling a sickie, because we just, really, really value being in work, making a contribution. That gratitude plays a big part in my life anyway. So yeah, that's kind of the basic introduction. Let's talk about the nitty-gritty of things to consider when it comes to best practice in transitioning to the working at home, and certainly in looking at the long tail and potentially what that might look like for disabled colleagues, either going back to work or choosing, ideally, having the choice of perhaps being a bit more flexible, staying at home.
Thanks, Robin. That's excellent. And again, that extra layer on, that we've got these colleagues. We need to make sure that we're recognising those adjustments that have been probably self-made temporarily, that might need refining slightly now that we've gone from 3 weeks to 12 weeks to and I'm sure many of us on this panel are shielding. I'm shielding, so 1st of August will be the first time I get out potentially. So kind of now feeling slightly nervous about that. So we do need to look forward into that. But what was really interesting for me when we all chatted earlier is that we've all got very different stories, which I think actually are important to share, because they are the stories that will be abound amongst your workforces at the moment. So I'm happy to kick off with, I have systemic lupus, so you don't see that I have a disability. It affects my eyesight. And how has COVID-19 affected me? Well, I'm working from home. I do quite a lot of that anyway. But the level of screen time, from call time or reflection on a train time or being able to nip in and out of meeting time, has had a significant impact on my vision, because it's just, we do a Zoom or a team where we'd have done a phone call or an email. So for me, it would be learning the lessons from putting some of that balance back in and not assuming we have to be looking at each other on a screen all the time. It doesn't suit everybody all of the time. It can be quite tiring. And if anybody on the panel comes up with a solution of what to do when you need a comfort break, where you just excuse yourself from the face-to-face meeting, I'll happily accept that guidance, because it's been a constant challenge for me over the past 12 weeks. But Nick, I obviously, I know you pretty well, so I've been following some of your messaging, but in summary, what's the impact been for you, and and why specifically because of your disability has that been an impact, and what can we learn from that as we go forward?
Thank you. Well, one of the biggest impacts is I've rediscovered biscuits for some reason, and where before I didn't have a biscuit problem, now I've got a massive biscuit problem. I don't seem to get out of bed without eating at least 4 custard creams. But apart from that, I think it does say I am a wheelchair user, and it's only about me, but it's also about an impact on the family. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. My wife is a key worker. It's about how do we rapidly manage changing situations about childcare, about who's going to do what, how my personal assistants, or if you like carers, how they can work with me in a rapidly changing situation. So for me personally, I've been quite risk adverse. So basically, and I've been quite kind of open, and I have been going out, and I have been going to shops, and it's quite interesting also when people perceive me as probably shouldn't be out, like we should be sealed in. So again, there's a lot of disabled people that are sealed in, but at the same time, it's making sure that we don't kind of come to a conclusion ourselves, and we still look at every disabled person as a individual. From a company point of view, I think we moved from an inclusive growth model to an inclusive recovery model. So quite a lot of people have been quite nervous about what they're meant to be doing and how they're meant to be doing it. And also, I think what is really interesting is the amount of guidance that is coming through, and how our employers, how our service providers are meant to really accommodate that and really manage that in real time. And I think one final point is this kind of real balance between how do we manage risk, but at the same time, how do we also understand impact? And I think that's really important from an employer's point of view and from a service provider's point of view. It's about managing the risk, understanding the impact, but making sure like either on an individual level or a organizational level, we're coming up with a truly inclusive solution. But I think treating people as individuals, and making sure that we're contacting and we're communicating people in the right way at the right time and for the right reasons is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the rest of the panel will agree with that, and that the treating people as individuals is absolutely key, because everybody has different needs. Some people are frightened. I'm really nervous about going out again. Other people are like ripping the doors down, desperate to get out again. And there'll be everything in between those two. So I think that's a salient point for everybody, is that talk to your colleagues, listen to their journeys, listen to their experiences, and have some flexibility and options in those responses. Maria, I know that we had a really good conversation about how empowering to an extent the lockdown has been because of the increased use of technology and Teams, which was more inclusive for you. But there's other dimensions as well. Would you be kind enough to share that with us?
Yes, of course. So obviously, now I feel that it is an incredible moment, because there is so much opportunity to learn for everybody about technology and inclusive technology. So, but specifically for me, the ability to use captioning, online captioning, whether it's through software provider, so for example, Microsoft Teams, or whether it's an additional service, as in, for example, this webinar. So that has been really amazing, because also other people have benefited from that. And so people are kind of more sympathetic and understand the benefit of inclusive technology. So that for me is a big thing, that I feel that more people kind of understand how I live my experience in the workplace. And definitely also they understand better in terms of fatigue after a whole day of lip reading, it feels like a whole day of video meetings and Zoom calls. So people are more sympathetic. But again, there are ways in which we can keep on learning and make the most of technology, but also purely and simple, make the most of people's collaboration and willingness to share and come together into sort of being inclusive for each other as people. So, for example, going back to your original question, Kate, when you refer to the tiredness of jumping from one meeting to another and how tiring it is for your eyesight. For example, I believe that there is a new application as part of the whole Microsoft suite that basically automatically alerts you when you have a break between meetings and invites you to quickly select it as me time. So that is really, really amazing, because I need a personal PA and I can't have one. So maybe technology can be really great. But at the same time, this is not to say that actually, as people and as colleagues, we also need to be mindful about this kind of thing. And we don't need, shouldn't always rely on software to do this for us, but also we could be mindful of the fact that it is really tiring for people to be on back-to-back meetings all day.
Thank you, Maria. And Maria, you shared with us that, being at home and remote working and having meetings via technology has, as you just shared with the audience there, been empowering for you and also educative for your colleagues from a collaboration perspective. How do you feel about going back into the workplace in these current circumstances?
I'm a bit nervous about going back to the workplace because although I really, really miss the camaraderie between colleagues, and I'm a social person, for me communication should be a value. But unfortunately, what worries me is they're commuting to work. And people, for example, wearing masks all the time, because obviously I wouldn't be able to lip read. There are, I'm quite amused by some of the posts being shared on social media recently, showing, people briefly trying transparent masks that should help with the lip reading. However, people don't realize that after a second of chew, those transparent masks will be fogging up as you speak. So obviously, lip reading will be still impossible. I've been reading all sorts of funny advice about, washing the mask with washing up liquid to avoid them fogging up. But really, do we have time? I'm a busy mom. I don't know if I have time to wash the mask with a washing up liquid.
Exactly.
So I am a bit worried.
It's like there's two ends of it.
I'm a bit worried about that.
Thanks, Maria. So, Paul, when we were discussing this with Maria before, we started talking about the fact that, have we got this risk coming through potentially now, where people not wearing a mask will be, victimised and targeted if it's not obvious why. So that was the discussion that we're having, as well as whether there's the potential for that, and that employers need to be mindful that somebody with autism, breathing challenges, who needs to lip read, whatever it might be, the whole variety, mean that the whole mask for safety could not be safe for them, and we need to try and work out how we educate around that to protect people. Paul, any thoughts from you in terms of what the next phase is going to look like for us?
I wish I knew, Kate, and if I did, I'd be very rich. I'd probably write a book. And I don't, I'm afraid. And we've literally been, I mean, you know, the last 12, 13 weeks for us in the NHS, it's literally been a learning curve. I mean, we talk about steep learning curves. I mean, we've literally learned as we've gone along, you know, and the things that Maria's just described, for example, you know, around masks, we had the same issues just around PPE generally, because, you know, again, nobody anticipated the impact of having to wear that sort of stuff, you know, for 12 hours on a 12-hour shift. And so we had to adjust our guidance literally as we went along in order to accommodate that. And we are at the moment trying to deal with the mask issue in the same way. So we've had, you know, requests for, you know, transparent masks, and we've tried to respond to that. But of course, as Maria said, it raises its own challenges and its own issues, and we've had to try and deal with them as we go along, which we're trying to do. I think the promising thing for me is that this whole episode has, if you like, heightened people's empathy levels. I think there's a greater willingness and a greater desire, if you like, to listen to people's experiences and people's stories and try to respond to them, particularly from employers. I mean, our employers have been fantastic. You know, I really can't fault them at all. And you know, and I think there's also a sense of that in the public as well. So, you know, you're talking about masks on public transport and outside of the workplace. I think there is a desire to, particularly in this country. I mean, I know we've seen some kickback in other countries like America, for example. There's been some quite violent protests against wearing masks generally. But I think here, I do generally think people are much more empathetic, much more wanting to understand people's challenges and to try and address them somehow. So.
I think
sorry, Nick. Yeah, did you say something?
Yeah, I think another interesting challenge will be if we move towards a local lockdown scenarios as well, and how do we manage reasonable adjustments in that kind of very quick, real-time local environment. That's going to be interesting as well. And again, you know, it's never been so important for employers to understand what adjustments their disabled employees need, okay, and how they can be applied in a really agile way, and a really quick way. And that's going to be a very interesting challenge and opportunity going forward, I think.
Thank you. And I know, Robin, that's an area very close to your heart. So would you like to build on that from Nick?
Absolutely. So when people switched to home working, it was all very rushed and it was all very ad hoc. And a lot of the adjustments that people had at work, they weren't able to bring home for whatever reason. Maybe they were too bulky, maybe from a security point of view. So we kind of made do and mend, or kind of it was a make do scenario for the first few weeks, and probably as weeks have stretched into months, we're still using, you know, that stack of books to raise our monitor or to put our feet on because we're at a dining room chair and table. And, you know, all of those kind of ad hoc adjustments we really need to review now in light of the fact that things, you know, we are easing, but at the same time we're having flare-ups. Maybe there's going to be a second wave. It's very appropriate to discuss with your employees about longer term staying at home from a preference point of view. So for me as a blind person, I'm loving it. I've been brilliant in lockdown. Am I allowed to say that? But it's been so fantastic. I have actually been working from home for a very long time out of preference, because having to have speech, you know, screen reading software going in my ears all the time, being in a noisy office, and boy, my team or the people that I worked with in the office here in Warwick are noisy. So, you know, I kind of asked if I could work from home, and I've been, you know, I've really appreciated that. The adjustments that we have, we're going to have to look at making more formalized. So, you know, if you had an ergonomic chair, and this is nothing to do with impairment, this is to do with just safe workstation, usage or working. You know, can we get that now shipped to people's homes, or can we reproduce that at home? If people are at the dining room table, you know, let's look at a more permanent way of working for them. And there are very good, reasonable reasons why this should happen. So for me as a blind person, I'm loving the video calls, have done for a very long time. Even when people were meeting IRL in real life, I always explored whether there was a dial-in option, a video option, because, it's so much clearer. You can do 5 meetings instead of, traveling into London for a face-to-face, which as a blind person, I don't actually get any additional value out of. I'm sure the clients do, and that's why they request them. But now in lockdown, it's perfectly reasonable. In fact, it's essential that everything's done remotely, and let's hope there's a legacy for that, because people with a disability.
But Robin, would you not argue that in a way we need to stop thinking about reasonable adjustments as only for disabled people, and start thinking about reasonable adjustments that what do all our employees need? I've always argued that the whole concept of reasonable adjustments doesn't need to be disability specific.
Absolutely. So in terms of people with an impairment, for example, that would come under legislation. It would definitely be a reasonable adjustment to consider their request to carry on with home working if they have the right adjustments and support in place. But for the whole workforce, our office in Warwick had 16 desks. It's going to go down to 5. Yeah. And people who want to go in will go in for 2 days a week from the end of the summer. And people can choose to work from home. And I think that's all fantastic. It reduces costs. It actually increases productivity because people aren't necessarily, having to travel for team meetings, etc. There are challenges with that as well. So disabled people in particular, as Nick mentioned, I think it was earlier, you don't have your physical support worker with you that often you might have had physically in your office with you. And a remote support worker, for many cases, it has its own challenges. If you've got physical issues, then they need to be there. If it's for a pair of eyes, I was lucky to have my family here to be able to click on things that I'm finding challenging. But, what would you do if you didn't have those people around and you're working from home solo? So, yeah, there are challenges there. But as we ease and things may start to go back to normal, my hope is that there will always be an online option for all of the reasons that we were talking about, for productivity, for making it, much more viable for some people to attend. So me as a blind person, as and when I have to start going to meetings again, the way a blind person gets around is by feeling things. I can't, sail through a ticket barrier at a station. I have to feel the edges of the ticket barrier. I have to feel where I put my card in. I have to, ticket in, all of that sort of thing. If I'm going to grab the arm of a member of the station staff to be led, that elbow that I'm grabbing is the elbow that the government has told them to cough into if they haven't got a tissue or a handkerchief. So there are lots of reasons why I'm definitely going to play that card. That's maybe not the right phrase, but that I'm going to push for ongoing remote access, because it's just so much better from a mental health point of view from me, and for a physical health point of view too. So yeah, I'm optimistic that things are going to be much more productive and much better for me as a blind person, and for people with other disabilities as well, to have to not deal with some of the more challenging aspects of their work prior to lockdown.
But I think there is a big issue around mental.
Sorry, Nick, I was just going to see whether we could bring Maria in, just because I know that there's some comments that you might want to make there, Maria, in terms of what HS2 are doing around making sure that all colleagues have those adjustments, and it's all colleagues, not just colleagues with a disability, which is a point very well made earlier by Nick. The issue around mental health, people with autism, neurodiverse colleagues, for whom this situation can be even more isolating, would be interesting to get your perspective on, Maria.
Absolutely. So at HS2, we use a specific system to track, adjustments for our workforce. Whatever system you use, it is really important that it has guidance that is flexible, and that it actually is flexible enough to help people in whatever situation they're in as it changes or evolves. So, for example, we use Clear Talents, and they help us keep track of the adjustments that we make for staff not only normally, but also there is a section there that is all about COVID-19. And I think that is important because in a way, it brings to light the universality of the need for having adjustments in the workplace. It's not just disabled people, people with long-term conditions. It's anybody can be disabled by their circumstances. And it's important to have a system that reflects that. And also, it's really important that we look at how access to work is being provided and that it is effective to the suddenness and flexible changing circumstances of people, especially during lockdown. So I think those two combine. When you have, you know, diversity or human resources experts who are paying attention to this, I think you'll find that you're not only helping disabled employees, but you're helping everybody.
Yeah, I agree, Maria, and thank you for that, and thanks to Nick and Robin for highlighting those points. So before I come on to, we're going to take some questions, and I want to make sure we've got time for some points of wisdom. I could speak to each one of you for an hour, just each one of you individually, because you've got so much to give. So we'll definitely revisit this. I think that might be a request from the audience anyway. But what about people for whom we've had Robin's case and actually Maria's, where they've adapted to working at home, and although socialisation wants to get back out to work, there are benefits of the current system and technology moving forward. But what about our colleagues and employers listening now that need to make sure that people who've been more isolated than maybe previously, who, to quote Maria, have been disabled by the environment and the situation, whereas previously might not, have classed themselves as requiring an adjustment or support. Has anybody got something they'd like to share with the audience on how we might best manage that? Paul, thank you.
That's okay. I mean, it's probably a good time just to talk about, I think somebody referred to it earlier, I think it was Maria actually, was talking about, the benefits that technology have brought through this last few weeks. I think for us, that has also manifested itself in the power of networks. Because, all of us, I think, would expound, the benefits of networks, and we encourage organisations to develop networks for their staff, and we have done for a long, long time. I think that in the past, I think networks have suffered because of the challenges just around getting a group of people together. And that, for me, has been a revelation in the last 12 weeks. The number of network meetings that I've seen evolve and grow and develop just purely through the greater accessibility that this technology has given us has been incredible. And I think that's something that has its benefits, because those are the places, those networks, where people can have those conversations. The conversations we're having here today, by virtue of Maria and Robin and Nick sharing their personal experiences, that's where you have those conversations, and that's why they're so important.
Thank you, and that's why we learn. Robin, sorry, Nick, I've missed you because you're on my left. I'm going to come to Nick first, Robin, and then over to you. Sorry.
Yeah. But I agree with Paul, but I do really worry about isolation. I really worry about anxiety, and I think that whole issue about how we don't see tech as a panacea, but we are very conscious that, for a lot of people, well, most people work for a whole range of different reasons. And one of those reasons is about human contact, as the, moving from one environment to the other. So I think it's really important that, as we go forward, again, what we always say, we don't assume that all disabled people want to go work at home. We all assume that all people are tech savvy, but at the same time, we always work on those individual adjustment plans on a very individual basis. And as we go forward, it's around preference, if you like, rather than, oh yeah, you're disabled, you're going to stay at home and use tech. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the starting stats that Paul shared earlier around the impact of COVID-19 on people with a disability, in fact, with Maria, apologies, versus the stats within the workforce, does not mean that everybody with a disability is more likely to contract and struggle with COVID-19. So it's that individual approach and putting people in control as well of their own support, I think.
Yep.
Robin, you're busting now with a flight, waving. You've used every method to get my attention, and you've got it.
Thanks. So yeah, as far as isolation, I mean, I've, because I was antisocial and chose not to work from the office for many years now, I've actually, since lockdown, spoken to my colleagues much more than before. And the simple vehicle for that was a scheduled afternoon daily team call. It's called Virtual Afternoon Tea. And it was only 15 minutes every single day. It carries on. And there's only 2 rules. So this would be the top tip if you're going to implement one of these, if you haven't done so already. The 2 rules to it are no talking about work, no shop, and no talking about the virus either. So those are the only 2 ground rules. And people have come with pre-prepared jokes or, what they, some interesting thing that has happened to them that day or the day before or whatever. So that's a really good thing. And they're really well attended. And as I say, I've actually talked to people more than I have done before now. That's obviously not kind of a panacea, but it's certainly, something that has proven really, really valuable from a social point of view. But another quick point is that the apps, we talked about stats earlier, data collection during this period is absolutely vital. And apologies if Maria has flagged this, but HS2 are one of the many organisations using Clear Talents, which is a diversity profiling solution. And it includes all of the 9 protected characteristics. Mental health has got a particular focus. It has the DSE, display screen equipment, element in it as well. So everyone should do it at least once a year. So it's like a live, living document where people go and update it across all of the areas that they're finding challenging. And so as long as the organisation promotes that sufficiently, that's the place where people can flag issues that they're having across all of these different areas. And obviously it's been updated for COVID-19, home working, mental health in particular, and the video conferencing, highly covered in there, and some top tips there for inclusive video conferencing. And it's including the stuff as we are easing and kind of making the transition back to work for some people. So Clear Talents is the way that you can gather that information. And the people that create the profiles, the line manager or wellbeing team gets a report that has tailored specific reasonable adjustments relating to what they've disclosed. So it's really, really supportive. Needless to say, the disability element is all around the social model, of course, not about what your diagnosis is, for example.
So we've got lots of top tips coming through. Thank you very much, Robin, for that. And my favourite so far is building in from Microsoft providing the opportunity for us as individuals to have our personal time. I'm definitely going to be looking into that, and that's something that all of the interactions that I'm having with you guys on the webinar today and other colleagues elsewhere is that that feeling of it being relentless, and if we're feeling that, then our colleagues are feeling it. So as employers, we do need to try and work out how to resolve that. And the only other point that's come up that's not come out as yet, and then I'll see if we've got just a couple of minutes for questions, is this issue of the coffee breaks and afternoon teas are brilliant. We've done those. I copied Lloyd's immediately on week 1. They've got that set up, and we've done it as a team. We've got a lot of quizzes apparently in the Clear company that we didn't know we'd got. It's got very competitive. But outside of that immediate team has become increasingly difficult. So that's where the networks that Paul mentioned earlier are important, and also broader communications out as employers, because it's very easy to become isolated within a small team and to lose that opportunity that sometimes people, disabled colleagues, it might be their first job, there might be, as Nick said, people with a mental health condition or a cognitive processing situation might find it more difficult to network internally beyond their immediate team, so we need to look out for that as well. We've had loads of insights from the panel. I think we should do this again. and build on it as we get closer to moving back forward. Nick, have we had any questions through at all at this stage?
More comments really than questions, but also some really interesting things that have come up, so that Access to Work are now looking at how they can support disabled people at home as well as going into the workplace. Somebody else noting that remote working has enabled them to have 50 plus people at their disabled staff network meeting, which was the best ever attendance. And that
brilliant.
Also, yeah, but also noting as well, as we've all said, that technology has amazing benefits, but also complexities and problems as well. And then one other one saying they would encourage people to look at the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks, which I believe is a Google initiative.
Great, thank you for that. I think that's one of the things. We'll be putting some thoughts together post webinar. What we always do is pull together any resources that have come up and any key messages, and within a couple of weeks or so we'll hopefully put something out to everybody who's attended the webinar. So if anybody's got insights or anything they want to share and put in there, please do share with us, because as I think it was one of you said, and I can't remember which one, so please accept my humble apologies, that we do seem to be more collaborative and be sharing more. I think it might have been you, Paul, that, that we're just listening to each other more and being more empathetic. And I think the power of collaboration is going to be absolute coming out of this situation. But I'm the chair, you shouldn't hear my voice anymore. So I'm going to ask each of our colleagues on the webinar to just give us, what would your top point be to just leave with this amazing audience that's stuck with us throughout, which is great to see as well. What can they take back and do differently tomorrow that might have an impact positively for them? Nick, can we start with you, and then people just jump in as you will?
I think my main message to employers would be obviously be receptive, be confident, remembering that all of you have probably done loads of good things already, and remember we are all learning together. So it's about kind of having that environment where you feel able to raise questions, disabled employees feel able to keep that kind of joint working going as we go forward.
Thanks, Nick. That's brilliant. Thank you. Paul, do you want to follow on?
Yeah, I've got two words written down in front of me, Kate, from listening to the conversation today. The first is possibilities. And I've written that down because I felt very uncomfortable actually with the word opportunities. Because opportunity feels like you're exploiting a situation. And this doesn't feel like a situation that we should be exploiting. But what it has done is opened up opportunities. And these are just opportunities. I mean, everybody has said actually that they're not a panacea. I think that was Nick's term, and they're not absolute solutions, some of these things, but they are possibilities. So we can work from home. We can use technology from our dining room tables if we so wish. We can get chairs taken from offices into homes and have reasonable adjustments made at home. There are all sorts of things that we can do. We need to find the right balance of things. And that links to my second word, which is choice. We've got to remember about choice. And I've just written down the mantra, which you'll all know, and I quote it time and time again: nothing about us without us. Yeah, that's where the disability movement started. That was the mantra that brought about the Disability Discrimination Act originally. And that's the principle that we need to hold on to, that whole thing around choice.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. We've seen quite a lot of decisions being made for all of us without discussion, parents about kids at school and all sorts of things about chatting to parents. And yeah, nothing about us without us, I think, goes beyond disability generally, but it's particularly pertinent in this context. Thank you very much for that. And I agree about possibility. And I wasn't trying to be opportunistic, but you know that anyway. I know we know each other well enough. Robin, final words from the Christopherson.
Yeah, so I think it kind of follows on neatly from what you guys were saying before. I mean, opportunity, okay, it's not necessarily, I mean, I'm happy to use it because I've already said that I thought that lockdown was brilliant. So on a personal level, but the opportunity to do things in a better way. I think is really important. And I always loved that stat from the chat room about the fact that you can now, the uptake of attendees to the disability interest group has gone through the roof. I think that's brilliant, and that's just the kind of thing we're talking about. But on the nothing about us without us, a lot of choices have been made since lockdown, since the transition to working from home. And my key takeaway would be a call to action to say, go back to your organisations, look at every decision that's been made since lockdown, particularly around processes and software solutions in particular, and make sure that any decisions that were made in haste are actually the right ones from an inclusion point of view, particularly from an accessibility point of view. Because, if you look at collaborative working platforms, if you look at online meeting platforms, there are some really, really inclusive ones out there, and they're getting better all the time. So, we've now got live captioning in Teams as standard, for example. Google Meet has included it, Zoom, hopefully, at some point. And those are things that were kick-started or kicked into action by lockdown and the uptake of these different platforms. Apple's event last week announced to their video conferencing that if there's any signers in the group of attendees on a video call, as soon as it detects signing, which it does by recognizing particular movements of the hands, etc., it will bring that person front and center. So people in the room that require signing, that person won't be a little thing tucked away in the corner or won't be hidden because somebody else is speaking. So there are going to be advancements apace at the moment, driven by lockdown and this new kind of environment and way of working. So there's loads of opportunities, I think, for being a more inclusive workplace, wherever that workplace is.
Thanks, Robin. That's brilliant. Maria, we're going to end on a high with Maria. What's your final point for our audience as we run slightly over time, but we're going to get away with it.
Okay. Well, a very, very brief one. Just to say, technology, procedures, they're fantastic and they're helpful, but nothing beats human interaction. And I'm kind of inspired by the words of our director of HR, Neil Hayward, who said that you should ask people how they are, and when they say, I'm fine, thank you, you should say, how are you, again. And what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we take for granted the fact that people are confident enough to share what they need. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes you could be the most tremendous disability advocate, and on a bad day, you really struggle to voice how difficult you're finding things. So nothing beats the human interaction. So all the line managers, all the colleagues are there, just talk to people, reach out to people, ask, how are you? And then ask again. And I think really that's the start of any meaningful dialogue on inclusion.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end. We have gone over time, but that's a really perfect, simple, but profoundly important step that all of us can take starting from right now. Just leaves me to say thank you very much to Nick, Paul, Robin and Maria for joining us today, and for Nick, the Clear team for setting it up and all of the technology. I don't envy you your job. It's been a pleasure. We will be back. Watch this space. And we're launching the Let's Be Clear podcast series. So listen out for that. That's going to be coming your way soon as well. Another chance to meet some of our experts. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon. And that's it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.